Hey folks, Rich here at RCINFORMER. Today I have a build and setup guide of the LX Models T-50 PAK from Banana Hobby. This is a really sweet airplane. This is the Russia's 5th generation stealth fighter, and the real airplane has only been flying for a few years now, and already we have this really sweet airplane to fly with full aileron, elevator, rudder, throttle, flaps, landing gear, and vectored thrust nozzles and everything. So really sweet airplane. Now this plane comes built well from the factory for the most part, but like most LX models, generally it needs a bit of tweaking for certain things, but once you tweak the items, it's really kind of a sweet airplane. Mostly I'm going to be covering, there's a lot of items I'm going to cover really in this thing. Mostly with the motor compartment, improving some things in there, and getting the landing gear straightened out and getting those rotating wires all fixed and working well for you. I'm also going to show you how to wire up the battery compartment area, because it's a little bit tight in there because there's 2 batteries, 3 cells wired in series. Getting the wings lined up and the stabilizers glued in so they're nice and tough. A long list of things. So this is going to be kind of a long video. I'm going to show you a lot of things to really improve this airplane and get it up and rolling and out to the flying field. Anyway guys, without further delay, let's get on with the video. One change I made to my T-50 regarding the elevator hinging, you can see how nicely this thing moves. I went ahead and changed the hinges that they actually included with the airplane. You can see right down here I used a really big hinge. It's like a sort of a Dubro style hinge. You can use the Dubros, either that or the Hobby King brand. It's a big flight control surface on this airplane, guys. This stabulator, there's a lot of load on this thing, and the hinges that they included with the thing are these little hinges right here, and you can see they're a little bit small. Actually, they're really tiny. And again, I use the Hobby King hinges, which are basically the Dubro equivalent, and it's just a much bigger hinge with a steel pin and everything. And again, for the amount of load that is on the stabilizer, it really warrants having a bigger hinge rather than just this kind of little spindly hinge here. Now I'm going to show you here what mine looks like up close before gluing it. Now I already glued the one side in, and you can see these 3 hinges in here. And what I had to do, okay, to make this thing work out really was, you can see there's a spar running through here, so these things can only go so far down into here. So what I had to do was actually cut some of the hinge off before epoxying it in place. And you're also going to want to roughen this whole thing up with some sandpaper, just put a few cuts in it just to make it rough, so the epoxy sticks to it. But you can see it'll only go in so far because it runs into this spar here. So it's real easy to put these holes in here, both in here and in the airplane itself. What I used to get my holes drilled was I started with a needle file and just made a quick hole down in there. I used a drill bit that was a little bit bigger just to finish up the hole. It's real easy to make the hole in the foam, and then you just sort of insert your bullet end of the hinge in there just like this to make it big enough, and then you cut it down to size, and you can see how the size of it that I made. Then you go ahead and glue them in place. Now I used epoxy. You can use what you want. You can use contact cement if you want to. Now especially if you use epoxy, what you want to do is use a little bit of oil, okay, and oil the actual hinge itself. Put some oil around the thing right just on this center section here. Don't get any on this part or on this part, because epoxy's not going to stick to anything with this oil on it. And the reason you're putting it on the hinge part, the moving part here, right here in the center, is to keep epoxy from getting in there. Because sometimes, you know, when you install your hinge in here and you push it in, epoxy oozes out. And if it oozes out and gets it on that part of the hinge, it'll freeze it. But if you have oil on there, the epoxy's not going to stick to it, and you can wipe some of it away, and then as it dries, it's not going to stick to your hinge, and your hinge is going to be, you know, really nice and movable. It's definitely the way to glue hinges in. I've been doing this for a lot of years like this. Same thing on this side, guys. When you make your holes to put your hinges in this side, do the same thing, only now you can use these things pretty much full length, and you can see how nicely these go in here. And again, the process of getting this in here is to go ahead and glue these through hinges in place first. Okay, actually right here on the stabilizer, glue them in just here the way you see them. And then as the glue is drying and before it dries, what you want to do is insert the 3 of these in, get this thing installed, okay, like this, and you only have glue, and this is real important, you only have glue on the stabilizer side, not in the airplane yet. And what you're going to do is make sure that this thing is set up working real nicely, and then you're going to go ahead and just let it dry like that, okay? Put something right on the front here just to keep the elevator nice and straight. Make sure everything is lined up nicely, and then just let it dry like that. Now, once it's done drying, you'll be able to pull your elevator out, okay? You'll be able to pull it all the way out, and these 3 hinges will actually, they will be stuck in here because they're going to be glued permanently in position, okay? And once these things are permanently in position and you've got them nicely glued, then you can go ahead and actually glue them into the airplane. Now, you also want to check as you glue these things that as they glue, these things are relatively perpendicular to the flight control surface. If you have one cocked off to the side a little bit, then they're not going to be hinged quite straight. But as long as you have these things glued in there and inserted just the way I showed you, when you pull these out, these will be ready to glue in place. At this point, if you need to use a little more oil on these hinges and then put glue on these 3 hinges and then put glue down into the holes, you insert this thing in here and you make your final gluing, okay, by gluing the actual hinges into the fuselage. And again, let it dry, and you're going to put something right on top here just to keep the elevator in the position you want it to be in. And here's where you're going to check your gap. You want to make sure that this gap is correct. And you can see how when I can let it dry in any position I want like this. And you want to make sure that it dries so this gap right here is nice and parallel, and you don't have the leading edge of it sticking out too much. And of course, you also don't want it sticking in too much where it's scraping, okay, the side of this thing. So you want to make sure it's right there in the middle. You have a nice parallel gap right here. If you need to trim away some of your plastic here, go ahead and trim some of it away. This is just a plastic piece. Mine wasn't glued in as well as it should be, and I'll probably glue that down a little bit before I glue this thing back in. But most importantly, get your glue on your elevator part first. Get that glued in place. Then glue it into the airplane, and as you glue it into the airplane, set this seam and make sure you got a nice gap here. And when you're done, you're going to have a really nice working stabilizer that doesn't interfere with your flap or with the fuselage. I did this with mine, and it works fantastic this way. One last tip I have for gluing your elevator bullets in, especially when you're using these big bullets and epoxy to glue them in, is a lot of times when you put the epoxy on the actual bullet itself and you put epoxy down in the hole, especially with the long bullet end, okay, into the fuselage, what can happen is as you push this thing in, there's such a nice tight seal, okay, on that epoxy that when you push this down in here, you actually create an air bubble in here, and what it'll do is it'll actually start pushing the hinge out. So there's no way to fight that air bubble. It keeps pushing the hinge out, pushing the hinge out. So here's what I did on mine, and I've done this in a lot of cases. On both this side, on the elevator side here, on the underside, and before you glue these into the fuselage on the underside here as well, and especially on the fuselage side because the bullets are pretty long and they go in there. And when you push that in there with epoxy, you'll generally create an air bubble here, and it'll try and push the hinge back out. So to prevent that from happening, what I do all the time is I take a pin and I'll stick it right here. I'll push it in so it actually enters, you can see there, into the hole. What you're doing is you're making a place for that air to escape. So when you put your glue in this side and you go ahead and you put your hinges right in here, what will happen is that air can escape here and some epoxy will escape there. So any excess epoxy that you see there, you can just take a little bit of alcohol or a little bit of paper towel alcohol and just clean that off. So once you have your 3 bullets glued into this side of the air, into the actual stabilizer itself, you've cleaned off, you've got your 3 holes here, here, and here. You can even put more than 3 if you need a couple in here. Once you have this side glued, all 3 hinges glued, and then you go ahead and insert it in here. Before you insert it in here, put 3 holes underneath here, okay? And that'll make those bullets go really nicely into there. Again, you'll probably have air escape out of the bottom of the foam here, and some epoxy will escape, but it will allow your hinge to really seat in there without it pushing the hinge back out. Make sure you do clean up afterwards, but this is a great way to hinge these things without the bullets being pushed back out. After I hinged my stabilizer hinges, as you just saw in the previous clips, I went online and looked at some of the forums and some of the actually catastrophes guys have been having with some of these stabilizers coming off in flight. And by hinging it this way, you're going to have a much tougher tail section. However, again, after watching some of the videos and the tails breaking off and stuff, I realized that there really is a tremendous amount of load on this thing. Notice how when this thing goes up and down, all the load actually gets transferred to this this outermost hinge right here. So even though the hinge is stronger, and you know, probably would survive a couple flights like this at least, but eventually it may just tear through the lack of foam, because there's really not a whole lot of foam here. The hinges might survive, but the foam won't, possibly. And you can see here how this whole thing just moves up and down. The hinge really needs to be to the, more or less on this outer spot, and the factory probably really just needs to redesign this and just have a big, strong, plasticky type piece with a steel pin hinge running through the whole thing, a big steel pin like some of the other EDFs on the market that have a flying tail like this. But you can see there is a lot of load on this, not just pitching up and down, but also a twisting type motion, just because there's so much control surface here. So what I decided to do, instead of take mine out and maybe have the same fate happen to mine, I decided to think of a way to sort of redesign this, and here's what I came up with. And this is tough. You can see here when I move this thing, the tail surface, this surface, and the tail fuselage surface, all this area has now become one. It's nice and tough. It doesn't move. The play has gone out of it. And there's just a very strong structure here. Now, the way that I did this is pretty much just I removed the steel pinned hinges that were in the hinges that I actually put in there, and I put a piano wire all the way through from the inside. And you can actually put it through here, and it actually goes all the way through both engine nacelle, or both through this engine nacelle. It actually goes through both of these hinges, and it actually goes into the stabilizer about this far. So it's about a 6-inch piece of piano wire running through that. Not only that, but you can see here I glued on a bulkhead right here, okay? And I glued on a bulkhead right here. And I added a 4th hinge spot that I'm going to try and show you here if I can zoom in on this thing. You can see where the hinge runs all the way through that corner. So now there's actually a 4th hinge spot running through a wood hinge right here. So all the load actually now is right on that spot as well. So you can see that as I move my stabilizer, if I grab this and move it up and down, you can see there's almost no movement there. The whole thing is really just one piece now. The next thing that I did, because I realized as I flexed this up and down, it was nice and strong, but the foam right here actually has a seam running all the way across here. So now this section was tough, the hinges were tough, but it was now flexing and probably going to break right around here, because there's not a lot of foam here. This whole thing is really thin, just a sort of piece of foam there. So the next thing that I did, as you can see here, is I drilled a hole and I put a carbon rod in there, and I fed the carbon rod all the way through. It goes into the engine nacelle. You can see right here, I'll get a close-up, you can see it runs all the way through there, and then it runs into this, this center section right there. So now there's a really nice carbon spar running from the center all the way through the engine. You're going to lose a tiny bit of thrust with that thing, running through in there, but not much. The added structure is worth it to have a little bit of the thrust blocked a little bit. But it runs all the way through into here, and it now supports that entire thing. Additionally, to strengthen where this seam is right here, I decided to take some of this thin carbon stripping here and as a laminate, I went ahead and just laminated, as you can see here, how this all looks there. And I epoxied it. I sanded the surface down, epoxied it down, and actually pushed it through into here. I made a slot. Remember, this is just foam, guys, so this stuff's real easy to cut. And I epoxied this down and this down. Again, they go into the nacelle. If we look farther, actually down into the engine here, let's see if I can focus on it. It actually sticks out right there and right there. I sanded them flat so they wouldn't protrude into the ducting here. You can see the pin that sticks out, which is the metal pin, which is the piano wire. I'm going to push that in flush when this thing is done and ready to go. One of the nice things is you can reach in here with a pair of pliers, push it back into the engine compartment, and with a pair of pliers, grab it right where it is and push it all the way back into here and actually remove your elevator for transport. So that's another bonus added to doing it this way. So this whole thing is really tough the way it is. After doing all this, then I realized that, you know, this horn is only in foam, like the rest of these are, but these are small surfaces. This surface is huge. And I noticed that this thing, with all the torque and all the load on this and all the probably 3D hovering and spins and things I'm going to be doing with this, it's just going to bend right here and probably just destroy the foam in here. So I took a flat piece of ply, just ran it across here, carved it out and glued it in with epoxy. I did another one on the other surface, on the top surface of the thing. Now you have a real nice stabilizer. It's real strong. The internal structure here is strong. The control surface is strong, and now it'll be able to handle all kinds of load that you might want to put on this thing. Now let me disassemble the thing and I'll show you what the inside of it looks like so you can get a kind of a better idea of what I did. Here's how the back end of the fuselage looks with the stabilizer removed. You can see that this plywood piece, I really just cut around it with a hobby knife and then just sort of buried this piece of plywood on in here. And really just turned it into really a fourth hinge right here on the end. So all the load is now taken off this outermost hinge, and it's really all on here. Again, combined with the carbon tube that runs all the way through. Now, just to give you an idea of how this hinge goes in, it actually comes in. I actually fed it through the hinges here, and it goes all the way through. You can see here through the engine compartment, and all the way here into this center. And you can literally just take this thing and push it through, okay? And you can grab it with pliers, even through here, to install it and remove it, like I said, if you really want to get the tail off. But you can see here how just from the inside section here, this whole thing feeds all the way through this thing, goes in through all four of these hinges now, because you now have four of them, and then it goes into the tail section, which you can see right here. And again, I laminated just a piece of plywood right on the end of it here. Let's see if I can get close in on this thing, if my camera will focus. And it goes into that hole right there. And again, it travels a good, you know, probably 3-4 inches into here. It goes in about this far. So you've got a piano wire, again, now running all the way through here. Now, you can also see the reinforcements that I put these flat plates on here. Again, real easy. You just lay them down there with really a paper pattern and just carve around it and sand it all down, and then just put this piece, just glue it on there with epoxy. You can see on the top side, I did the same thing, and that actually eliminates the need for having that top plastic plate, because you got wood to screw it into. Now this will all be painted over when I'm done with this thing, but this should just give you the basic gist of what this looks like, and really how tough this is. Now in the previous steps you saw how I hinged this. The only change that I would make to hinging it that way, if you choose to do this thing this way, is to run the piano wire all the way through, you know, before you glue these 3 hinges in place like you saw in the previous steps. Remove the steel pins from them first, okay? And then hinge all 3 together with a piece of piano wire just the way you see it, and glue all 3 hinges simultaneously together. That way they'll all be lined up. I actually got lucky with this one. They were lined up perfectly the way that I had glued it on there. But they don't always turn out that way, so you really want to, as you glue in these 3 hinges first, you know, use a piano wire through all 3 of them as you glue all 3 in simultaneously, and this thing will line up nicely. Now again, really this whole piece, this whole section back here, the entire stabilizer piece, they really probably need to do some redesigning at the factory with some larger plastic pieces, you know, on this with probably a steel pin on the tail. But this is actually relatively easy to do. Again, you're just working with foam and some wood pieces. You just have to engineer this thing a little. and it comes out really nice and strong this way. For anybody that wants to hinge theirs this way, again, before you start out, it's real important to note that the first thing you want to do is really not glue these in with these pins in place. You do want to take, what I did is I took a pair of flush cutters, and you can see how they tuck right underneath the end of this pin, this rivet where it's pressed on. Squeeze them and it'll break that head right off. And then just squeeze around it with a pair of pliers or go around it a couple times and remove as much of the end as you can. And you can see right here that that whole rivet-like pin will actually come right out of your hinge. So in the previous steps, again, as you saw where I glued these hinges in place, you actually want to glue them together with a pair of wire, with a piece of the piano wire running through all of them as you initially glue them all in. That'll ensure that all these holes are lined up. Otherwise, you may not have them all lined up. And then once you've got all three of these hinges in place, then you can go ahead and remove your initial your piano wire through into the inside of the engine compartment area to remove your elevator, and then you can begin the following steps, which I'm going to show you here, of how to get the new bulkhead on, how to apply the strips, how to put the carbon spar all the way through, and you'll be good to go. So just be sure to remove those hinges again, or those pins right here, and use a piano wire to glue all your hinges in all simultaneously so they're nice and lined up. You can see here the first step in the hinging process is completed, where I've hinged or glued in all three hinges, just like you saw in the very first step of this process, only this time I did it with a piano wire running through all the holes, so we can actually ultimately hinge this whole thing with a piano wire. And what I'm going to do is reach into the engine nozzle actually with a long pair of pliers and very carefully pull it out. And you can see as I pull it out, the whole hinge just comes right out, the piano wire, and we can now unhinge our surface and get to work on the rest of it. You can see here by looking in the exhaust nozzle, you can see where the hinge goes. It runs all the way through the foam and through the engine area and then into the hinges. And with a really long, you can see this really long set of pliers, I just reach on in here and I grab this wire, and when you install your stabilator, you can very carefully just push on the engine with your thumb over here and just install this hinge. Now again, this is how this thing is normally going to be installed, and it's going to go all the way in when we ultimately install this thing. It's going to go all the way in so it actually mounts flush here, and then your piano wire is actually going to go all the way into your stabilizer, actually quite a bit, and we'll talk about that later. But this is basically how this entire thing is both hinged and unhinged. And as I talked about before, if at any time you want to remove your stabilator for transport, because they stick out quite a bit, it makes this whole thing a lot easier to install and uninstall. And you can see how nicely that piano wire hinge just passes all the way through. It even goes into the center section. With your stabilizer and your piano wire hinge removed, you do want to sharpen a tip on your piano wire. This is about 6 3/4 inch long. You're going to want to just reinsert this thing back into your stabilizer. Now all your hinges are nicely aligned because you glued it on the airplane that way. And you're going to make your initial hole, okay, into the stabilator. You're going to push that thing in quite a bit. And it'll go right through the foam. You just want to make sure it's lined up straight, which it should be, because it can actually poke out of this thing. You just got to be careful with that. And it's going to go in quite a ways. You know, you only have a little bit sticking in because this is actually going to mount flush again with the inside of the exhaust tube here. But initially, you just want to punch your hole through there so this whole thing is lined up nicely. Now, because I already did one side, I used the other side here, as you can see, as a pattern to make the other blocks here that I needed, or the other hinges I needed for the other side. Now, I did use a 1/16 piece of aircraft ply for this that I just literally cut out. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to use this thing right in here. And what we're going to do is using a hobby knife, we're going to very carefully line this thing up, and we're going to trace with a hobby knife, a very sharp brand new hobby knife. So we're going to trace right around here, just very carefully. It's foam, it's really easy to cut, and you're just going to cut down in there the same depth as the wood you use. And we're going to countersink this thing down in here so that this hinge hole, as you can see right down in here, is all going to fit and line up with the rest of the hinges. Just like we did with the stabilizer side, we're going to install our nice straight piano wire hinge, and we're going to put our wood hinge bulkhead right on here. And just like again with the stabilizer side, once we get this thing lined up, it's nice and straight, we're going to go ahead with a hobby knife and again just kind of cut into here, lightly into the foam, again with a new hobby knife, and we're going to countersink that thing and glue it in place. You can see here after tracing out with the hobby knife, a lot of times you can just pull the paint sometimes right off of this. Doesn't always work out this nice, but a lot of times you can do it this way. Then using your hobby knife, again a nice sharp one, you're going to go ahead and very carefully just sort of cut along this and just lightly score this thing, okay? You don't have to go very deep, only as deep as the wood that you're going to use, that 1/16. And then you can also go kind of diagonally with it, or perpendicular to it if you want to. All you're trying to do is just break up the foam so you can clear the area away a little bit, and then you can countersink this wood right down into it. You can see that the more that you cut a grid into this, the easier it'll actually come out of here. And usually I'll just take my hobby knife at this point and I'll start sort of just breaking this whole thing away. Again, you only want a 1/16 of an inch of this stuff to come off. And you want the surface actually under there to be relatively rough, because we're going to epoxy this whole thing in place anyway. And then once you're done with your knife, you know, you can take these, again, this is what I use is on the end of sticks, is I just use some sandpaper that's actually glued on there, some rough stuff. And I'll use that just to kind of sand this all away and get it nice and countersunk just the way you want it, with everything nice and flush with the painted surface. You can see here both completed surfaces. You can see the stabilizer with this nice flush mounted piece of plywood. Again, using your piano wire hinge to line that up and countersink it. Again, you can see the side here on the side of the fuselage here that's nice and countersunk, and you can see how nicely that thing just fits in place. You can see how rough this surface is, and again, you want to use this this sandpaper on a stick really to go right in there and just kind of sand that out, excavate that area out. Again, guys, this is foam, so this really just takes minutes to do this. This is really not a huge, long process. And using 15 or 30-minute epoxy, we're going to glue both of those in place just like that, with the pin in place as an alignment. You want that hinge there so these things are nice and lined up. And we're ready to move on to the next step. Once the glue is dry, both on the airplane and on the flight control surface itself, you're going to pull the hinge pins out, the piano wire out. You may have to twist it a little bit to get the glue to break, and there could be a little bit of glue sticking to the metal, but generally it doesn't stick to it. You may have to lightly sand it to get all the glue off. The next thing you're going to do is just sort of do a test fitting of the flight control surface on here. You're going to need to push it forward a little bit and make a little indentation of this piece of wood on the foam right here, because you can see you do have to cut a little notch out here with a hobby knife just to get it to fit, and it looks like it's a really nice fit there. Now you're ready to do a test fit and install your hinge pin. Installing your hinge pin is actually relatively simple, and here's how it's going to work. You're actually going to put the sort of the blunt end here into the hinge here, and push this thing all the way through. It's going to go into the engine compartment as we looked at before, and using like a long enough set of pliers, I have this really huge set here, what you're going to do is get a hold of that thing on the inside of the engine nacelle, and you're just going to sort of pull it all the way in, as you can see here. Once you have it right in this position where you can still see that tip, now you're going to go ahead and put your hinges here in place, and very carefully with the pliers through the engine, you're just going to push that whole hinge in and let that whole hinge just go all the way through here. And really this is just a test fitting to make sure everything flows real nice. And as you can see here, it's just a really nice hinge mechanism now. You can see here with the hinge mechanism fully installed in here, you've got your two wood pieces mounted in here. This thing is nice and tough, and as you move this, you can see there's no longer load on this outermost hinge. It's now on these two hinges right here. Now, what this did for me is as I move this, you can see, again, it's not pulling on this hinge anymore, but this whole surface area right here is now flexing, and that's what led me to put a carbon spar in through here and then two carbon spars right here, and I will show you how we're going to put those in next. Installing the carbon spar is pretty easy. First of all, you just have to really drill a hole right in here for the size spar that you're using, and I am using this 0.1250 by 75 by 0.075 inch carbon rod. The thicker the rod, the thicker rod you're going to have going through the tube here, and you want to make sure that you have one that is going to do what you want it to do. Now, first of all, you have to drill, once you drill the hole here through the wood, you have to drill a hole through the foam, and it has to be relatively straight. I use a needle file and kind of a long drill bit to do this, because remember, you're really just going through foam. The reason the hole has to be so far back instead of right here is, of course, you've got all three of these long bullet hinges that protrude through here. So this is about as close as I could get it. I wanted it to be closer to this pin, but this is the closest you could get it. Now, as you drill this through with a needle file, again, it's foam, so it goes through pretty darn easy. You do have to sight this thing and make sure it's parallel, and it goes right through here, okay, because this is a really thin piece of foam. At the same time, you've got to be looking down this way, okay, to make sure that this thing is parallel to your hinge pin here as best you can. If it's not perfect, it's not going to be any really big deal, but you do want to have it nice and straight, perpendicular to the fuselage, parallel to the hinge here, and then, of course, parallel to the fuselage right here, just going in nice and straight. Again, needle file or drill bit, whatever you need to get that thing through there, and then next you're going to cut yourself a piece of this tube, and you're going to insert it, as you can see here, right into this hole all the way through. Again, once you've drilled your foam, your hole through all the way through the foam. You can see here the carbon tube fully seated in place, and when you're all done with this, you can glue it into place if you want. Put some epoxy in the hole. You don't have to if you don't want to, but it'll probably stay in there just fine, but it's probably not a bad idea. At least put some CA here, or put some epoxy in the hole and do a final sort of installation on this whole thing. You can see here where it actually protrudes all the way through the engine compartment. Again, just like the other side that's in there as well. It's going to run through here, it's going to go all the way through, and it's going to go into this center section. And you can bring it halfway through or all the way through, but the beauty of it is now you got a real nice carbon spar running through here. So this thing now has some structure to it before, where it didn't have any at all, and it's going to really make the whole thing nice and rigid. Now again, you do have the spar running through there, but you know, that little loss of thrust coming through there is definitely a fair trade-off for the strength that you get in the tail of this airplane by installing that spar. The next improvement I made was the addition of carbon strips right along here and right along here, where you can see where I cut the channels. I cut those channels really just the same way that I did with this wood plate right here that you just saw, and this wood plate right here that you saw. You literally just lay these things out, go over them with a hobby knife, just trace them with a hobby knife. You only have to go flush with the surface. You want this thing to just be flush with the bottom surface, and then use your sanding tools like I made with these blocks again, just to sand in here and get them nice and flush again, so these things are just flush mounted. The reason I put these in here was because there is a seam of foam right here where these two join, and there's a lot of movement side to side, at least until you put this carbon spar in here. Once we put that carbon spar that we just already added, it greatly reduces a lot of that, but there is a servo right here, so there is some up and down movement front to back. There's not a lot of surface, not a lot of material right here. So just to sort of tie this all together and sort of laminate this whole thing, it made sense to run a diagonal here, because that covers the torque forward and back and right and left, and then this one helps side to side also. So now this acts more or less like in the old days when we used to foam core, or we used to have foam core wings with balsa laminates around them. It made for a really tough surface, but instead of laminating this whole thing and adding a ton of weight, I put a straight beam and a diagonal in here. Now these do go, as you can see, all the way underneath here, okay? And they go flush with the inside surface. So you cut them to the length you need to so they're not protruding inside here too much. I literally just laid a hobby knife down here, just like you see here, and just sort of pushed it with my fingers and used an Allen wrench or something to grab it just to pull it back out. But that's how I cut that notch in there, as you can see. Again, I'm going to epoxy these in place. You see how I scuffed this surface right here, and I scuffed the whole underside of this thing because I'm going to push some glue down in there when I do glue it in place. And we're going to push this thing all the way in here. As you can see, it goes in nicely. You do want to grab this thing with pliers and get it where you need it to be, but you want this thing nice and flush, and again, inserting in there if you can. Same thing with this one right here. You can see I kind of sanded this area that's going to go underneath there, and the whole underside of this, because again, I'm going to epoxy this really just all in one shot and sort of clamp this thing. Again, use pliers to adjust this thing where you need to, but once you get these things flushed down on here and epoxied in, this whole surface, this whole tail section of the airplane is going to be really rigid. You can see here it's not a bad idea to use a couple of clamps and a little block of wood under here to glue this thing in place. Once you're done with the epoxying everything, you can just remove the clamps, remove the wood, and you can see here you got a real solid tail to this thing. It almost hardly moves around. With these two spars here and the main spar running through here, you just have one heck of a solid tail mount for the stabilizer on this plane. The last part of the tail upgrade is adding these plywood skins to the top and bottom surface of the stabilizers. The stabilizer has a spar running through horizontally, but nothing vertically in it. It tends to flex a little bit this way, at least until you put the skins on, and then it makes it nice and tough. So no longer is there a weak spot here in the center, and you don't have to worry about the horn here rocking back and forth inside the foam, because again, this is a huge surface, and there's just a lot of torque on this this horn. So really, just the way we did the rest of this thing, you really just want to take come up with a good size of plywood doubler. You know, use a foam pattern to cut the thing out, and really just like we did before, you're just going to put it out here, down here with a hobby knife. Just trace it. It doesn't have to be this exact shape, but I just used this because it seemed to mimic sort of the shape of the surface a little bit. And once you outline it, you know, run through it with your hobby knife up and down and then sideways. And then again, use your sanding tools to sand it out, and you're going to countersink and glue this in flush with the surface. Now, what you want to do is put the top surface or the bottom surface on first, glue it in place, and flip it over before the glue is completely dry anyway, and get your holes drilled through here. So using this top surface as a pattern to where the holes are, then you're going to put your horn through the bottom side of this. Actually, you're going to cut the blade off right here because you don't want to no longer need that, and just sort of flush mount it on the way we used to do in the old days, and it'll be on there nicely. And then what you're going to do is remove the horn from there, and then do your second side. You're going to glue the top side on, and then now you're going to have the holes that are drilled in this side to line those up. And as you can see again from the finished one, there's no need for the top plate anymore because you can thread your screws right through that wood. You're going to want to soak those woods a little bit with some sea agent, those holes a little bit, just to make them tougher so the threads bite in them much better. You can see the flight control surface horn here that I used the flush cutters just to sort of cut that blade off because it's really not needed anymore. I sanded it flush just a little bit, and you can see here the first underside here piece that's glued in place. Again, it's nice and flush here. It fits on there real nicely. Again, I used a 15-minute epoxy to put that on with. You want to use this as a pattern to make your hole so it's nice and straight. The first thing I did really was to go through this side with the drill, with just a hand drill, and to start off the first hole. But you can use these holes here as a guide as to where these holes are going to go in here. And then again, use this thing as a pattern. You can see here the second side here that I have already traced out and already filed down. You can see what a nice rough surface this is, but again, just trace it with a hobby knife, score it, use your sanding tools, and then we're going to glue this top plate on again with either 15 or 30-minute epoxy. One last thing I did to the top side plate before gluing it on was to actually add a very thin piece of plywood to the inside, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue the plate on. The reason for that is just to give a little more thickness to the 4 screw holes here, and that will really help reinforce the wood threads and make them just a little bit thicker. Here's a look at the completed stabilizer with the bottom plate and the top plate installed. It's important to note that the top plate is actually a little smaller than the bottom plate, but it makes it real stiff. This whole thing is nice and tough now, doesn't really flex much, it's rigid, and it has great support here around the center. Again, I did use CA on those holes there and let it dry just to toughen up the wooden threads, but this thing is really nice and secure in place now. All that's left now really is just to put the whole flight control surface right back on here. Grab a pair of pliers from here, grab the piano wire hinge, and just little by little just push it in, and you can watch it go through here, and it joins the whole thing together, and you reconnect your linkage, and the whole tail surface is now done. Here's a quick look at the final completed stabilizer. You can see how nicely the whole thing moves and how nicely the whole thing works. And now it's nice and tough, guys. You can see when you move this thing, it's not bending on that hinge anymore. All the load is transferred right to here, which also translates to the internal spar and these 2 spars as well. So we now have a really tough, nice flying stabilizer on this airplane. All right, guys, here's a quick look at the finished product. You can see that once you add paint to this thing, you can really hardly tell anything happened at all. The paint really covers up everything well, all the spars, all the wood plates, and best of all, we now have a real tough flying surface and tail structure of the airplane, so we don't have to worry about this thing coming apart. As you can see now, everything works real nice, the way it should, and it's all painted and pretty much ready to go. A couple things that I did do that I do want to point out. In order to keep the spar in there, or the hinge, the wire hinge, the piano wire hinge, you can see right here in this corner I put a glob of contact cement to kind of help keep the tube from the pin from sliding out. It shouldn't, because you got to remember it's jammed up in the foam all the way up into here. Chances of it sliding out that way are slim to none, but with a little bit of contact cement right in that corner there, it should keep it all gummy in that corner and really keep it from moving at all, but it is really, really tight in there. And the beauty is if you need to remove that contact cement right there, which again, you probably don't even need it, it's easy to remove the tail, because all you have to do again is go back in there, and I'm actually going to leave that pin. You can see that pin protruding just a little bit. You can grab that, slide it again all the way through, okay, into the center section, and unhinge your tail for transport, because these tail fins stick way out on this airplane and it makes it tough to transport. So you can remove these things now. So again, quick review of the inside here. You've got that spar running through, the carbon spar running all the way to the center, and you can see on both sides it runs all the way to the center, and then on both sides you have that little pin right there, again, which you can grab, and that will let you unhinge the tail. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. It's a real strong setup this way. You can see here the top side painted surface. Again, you can't even tell if you airbrush this thing correctly. I just held a sheet of paper over this thing to get that nice defined line. Same thing here on the other side. This side here is all gray painted, but as you can see, again, it looks like almost no modifications were made to the plane at all, and you got a nice strong tail on this thing now. Here's a look at the main landing gear unit on this airplane. And this is sort of the before shot, and I'm going to show you some of the revisions I made to it. It's a real good gear unit, has real nice compression, nice tough struts. But there's actually 4 specific changes I made to it that I'm going to show you. Now, the way this thing works, you got a cable that's secured with this screw right here that runs all the way through this thing. And it comes through the center all the way down in there. And I'll zoom in here a little bit so you can see that. You can see how it comes right through the center, wraps around this white bar, wraps around this guillotine-like metal piece of the trunnion, and then it goes down into there and comes right basically up through here, and it's crimped here. The crimp connection is actually pretty darn good. That thing holds this thing nice and tight. So as this gear actually retracts into the well, the tension on the cable is released, and this screw actually runs through this channel, and it rotates it so it fits into the wheel well. Same thing, when it extends, the cable pulls it tight and actually rotates through that channel, and then it stops right here ultimately, which is where the gear is when it's in the down position. The problem with this is as it extends, as you as the gear compresses, and as many times as it extends and retracts, it actually ends up breaking the cable right here at this this screw. So this is sort of the connection that's not so good. And what it is that cable runs right in through here, and on the back side, I'll zoom in here and show you what it does. Again, they ran the cable right through the center of this strut, and then it sticks out. You can kind of see the end of the cable just sort of right here. It's kind of hard to see, but hopefully you can see it here in the HD video. And then as you see, the screw comes up through the other side, and it actually bites into that cable. And when it bites into that cable, it's actually cutting it. So the 1600 millimeter LX Corsair had the same gear unit and the same issue with it. So, and even on, I had one, a friend of mine had ones on the first takeoff that we did with it. That actually cable actually broke, because just that screw going in there is actually cutting the cable right off the bat. So I'm going to show you essentially how I fixed that. And really what I did was instead of running the cable straight through there, I actually loop it around that screw, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did that. The other change you're going to want to make, that I did with mine too, is, again, you can see here where the plastic covering sheathing over the cable here is getting severed by this guillotine-like sort of a knife blade here that this trunnion makes. So essentially you're going to want to disassemble this. It's real easy to disassemble, and then just sand or use a file and just round this thing. So as this cable goes around here, it's not cutting it right at this point right here. And then finally, you can see way, way down in there. I'm going to try and get this zoom so the camera will look at this. It's really hard for me to, there it is right there, guys. You can see right here where the cable actually comes right along this edge here, right here. And you can see there's kind of a sharp edge right by that cable. So when you disassemble it, take your hobby knife, file, whatever, and trim this thing, or just round that edge down so the cable is not, tempted to be too close to that maybe and get cut by that thing. And then the next thing that I changed actually was my axle. You can see here that they put this axle through here, and it's a 3 millimeter metric screw, but it's all threaded. So all that threading running through here as the wheel's turning, it's tearing up the inside of your hub. So essentially all I did is I used one of these, okay, just a 3 millimeter metric screw with a non-threaded part of it, okay, and I put it through the opposite direction. It actually goes through this side, and with some washers here and whatever appropriate washers and a nut on that end, I tightened it. I took this lock nut and put it actually on this side and secured it the other way. So now you'll have a nice free-moving wheel. They actually see they put a nut there, a bigger nut there, just as a spacer, and you can see that you can use any washers that you want on that thing. But anyway, now let's take a look at the revised gear strut, and I'll show you all the changes that I made. Now here's what it looks like after all the revisions are made. It doesn't look too much different than it originally looked, except now I've got a new cable running through here. This is actually the one from the other side of the airplane, so I'm just going to show you how I did this. Now, the cable you want to use is any of this stuff from a fishing shop. I had this stuff laying around. You don't want to use something too thick, but you want it to be tough enough, about the same thickness as the old cable that you can kind of see right in there. But you want it to have a sheathing around it. And this is like basically plastic sheeting around it, and this is a fishing leader line, so any place that carries fishing stuff, Sports Authority, Bass Pro Shops, whatever. And then it comes with these little tubes that you wrap around it, which is basically what this is, and then you crimp it. So essentially, to start off with this thing, you're going to unscrew this screw right here, and then the whole thing is going to disassemble, and you're going to see that the cable in there is just about to break anyway. So once you unscrew this, this whole part of the strut just pulls right out of here, and the cable will come right out, and you can just slide the cable right out of here. So it's a real easy thing to do. And then basically, I'll show you the basics of this using a drill, which I'm going to show you in the next frame. You're actually going to, through this lower part of the shaft here where this screw is, once this screw is out and you've pulled this strut out, you're going to actually drill a hole right through that, okay? That's going to allow you to actually make a cable loop, because as it stands, you can only put one strand of cable through here, okay, where the screw bites into it. But by drilling that hole out a little bit bigger and then going, as the drill goes in this way into the hole, you're only going to go a couple millimeters past that screw hole right there, because essentially this is what you're going to make. Your cable, this is a practice one I did. You'll have a cable running through right here that you're actually going to insert it back through this way once you make the loop end of it here. But essentially what's going to happen is this now loop, and you can see I crimped this end on here. You're now going to have a bigger hole through there where this whole loop and crimp design is going to go right into this lower strut, and you can see your screw will now go right through that thing. And your screw is going to go through this loop, okay, and it's going to go right into this side here. And then now you're going to have a loop running around that screw instead of it damaging and destroying the cable, and it's going to work beautifully. Now, a couple things I did have to change on mine. The screw that was on the original strut, which I'll show you right here, it was kind of short. You see, it was meant to bite that screw, and you can see the screw that I used was much longer. So I actually had to make myself another screw, and but the problem I had was the screw head was kind of too big to run through that channel. You can see here how I filed it down, and I'm going to throw a picture up here that shows you exactly how I filed this down. And I started off essentially with a longer 3mm screw that was all threaded, and you can see here I put it in a drill, and I just spun it on some sandpaper until I got it the right size here to fit in. So I've essentially made myself a new screw with a smaller head, as you can see here, and once you get it to the right size to fit inside this channel here, and you can see how nice and tight that is, then you can go ahead and cut the end of it off. Cut it to the length you need, so you can see here on the underside, it'll stick almost all the way through this strut. So once you have that all on there, and one more item I'm going to show you here too, what I did is you can see here right on the tips of the crimped end of this loop, I just sort of rounded them off a little bit here, sanded them a little bit, so they'll fit more easily in through the center of, there's like 2 or 3 springs in here, but it'll fit nicely. So now to get this whole unit back together again, all you're going to do is you're going to essentially feed the cable through this side of the retract first. Okay, it's going to come through this end, and you're going to go ahead at that point, and you're going to crimp your loop, okay, and you're going to round your edges here just a little bit on the crimped end, like we talked about, and then you're going to feed your looped end through your lower part of the strut, and then you're going to slide this whole thing together, and then you're going to go ahead and insert your screw. So now you're going to have this nice loop and cable screw secured with this whole thing in the channel, and you're going to have this cable running through here. So you're just going to wrap it right back around the trunnion that you actually sanded and rounded, like we talked about. That thing was like a guillotine, and you're going to run it through this end. So you're going to have a length of cable just running through this thing. Then you want to go ahead and mount everything to the airplane and put your gear in the extended position. And what's going to happen is this screw is going to be at its fully extended position, and then you're going to grab some pliers, pull this cable through until this screw runs along this track and stops about at the position you see it at, which is how it rotates. Actually does its rotation of 90 degrees. So in this position, you're gonna already have had one of these round tubes, crimp tubes on here. You're going to pull this till it gets right to this position right here, and then you're going to crimp your tube, and it's going to be nice and locked in place. then you're going to go ahead and just cut your cable off here, and voila, you guys have a brand new cable running through here. That it's got the really nice looped end wrapped around that screw, so it's not going to break. You've got your inner strut tube and your little guillotine like trunnion there that's all sanded and rounded, so it's not, so the cable's not going to cut it, and you're going to have a really really nice tough strut now, and it really shouldn't break. You can see here as I push on this, you can see how the tension gets released off of the cable and what it does. So every time that thing hits that trunnion area, you can see where if it was a sharp edge right there, it would cut that, and also again down in here, it would just cut there. So that's really it for installing the cable. I'll show you one next shot here that's going to show you exactly how to drill this hole right in here. Now that we've seen an overview of exactly the things I did to this gear to make it function a little better, I'm going to actually give you guys a little bit of a walkthrough how to do it. It's pretty simple. This is just one gear unit right off the airplane. I hadn't made any changes to it at all. And the first thing really you're going to start off doing is just removing this set screw. Now this is going to release the tension on the cable, and you can see it immediately sort of releases itself. And you're going to just pull this screw out. This is the screw that we're going to actually make sort of a longer version of it to go through here. But you can see how all this just pulls out. The springs just come right out. And then you can also see in here, this is the area that we are going to drill. You can see there's just enough room for the cable just to stick through there. And we're going to drill, I believe I used a 9/64 drill bit. Yeah, there it is, 9/64. And I just basically just drilled this out a little bit and just drill it in so it just barely passes the screw where the screw is going to go in, so we can get that loop around that screw. Now with the unit itself here, all you really need to do is just pull the cable right on out of here. And you can see how the little guillotine thing in there was actually fraying it here, and then at the very end you can really see how those the screw that mounts this thing really is just sort of doing damage to this thing. And there's really just enough room for this thing to barely fit in here. And again, it goes in here, in the hole, and then the screw again just bites down. You can see how it bites down on the cable, and it really just cuts through it. So again, we're going to put a loop through that, and you know, show you guys how to feed all that back in there. But again, we're just going to take a 9/64 drill bit, drill this out. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, show it to you. Then we're going to disassemble this gear unit and sand down the areas in there that we need to. The next thing you want to do is remove the 4 screws that hold on one of the side plates, and then just sort of wiggle this thing. Go ahead and take it off. You'll see there's sort of a hexagonal piece here that holds the axle here that holds the trunnion in. And really carefully, you can just remove this thing. Then you want to take either a file or, like I have here, just some sandpaper on a stick. I got both grits here. And you want to round this edge as best you can. Make it as dull and round as you can, because this is that sort of guillotine type knife edge where the cable's going to run around, and you just want it to be as rounded and as dull and as smooth as you can. Then with a hobby knife, you go right in here and just shave down this edge that was right here. It's made out of aluminum, so I'll zoom in here a little bit. You can see here that you know, just using a simple knife blade, or you can use a round edges needle file or something. You can take away some of that aluminum and just round it off so all these edges are nice and smooth, and the cable you know, won't get cut by them. And then really just put this thing back together. It's pretty easy to sort of pop this this whole thing into place. This thing's octagonal, so you have to sort of wiggle it around a little bit to get it to fit in there. And it can be a little cumbersome, but once you get it in there, it kind of all fits in real nicely. You can see how actually easily this all goes back together. Then you just put your 4 screws back in place. Now that you have your retract mechanism back together, it's time to sort of prep the whole thing and get ready to assemble, get everything ready to put together. What you want to do is run your cable through the retract and out through the whole strut. You're going to put your springs back on, And then the next thing you're going to do is just go ahead and put your loop on the end of this thing and get it ready to kind of all go back together. And you can see what this thing looks like. I've already done a test fitting of it, but you can see here I have a loop already made. I went ahead and with the crimper and just crimped this thing. Again, you can see right here I rounded the edges of it so it'll slide easily, or at least won't snag on anything going up and down this spring. And then real carefully, now that you have your hole drilled as well, and again, 9/64 drill bit to drill that thing through, and you can see that makes it wide enough to accept the loop. And again, you can see how this goes all the way in. I'm just showing this for depth. You want to go just past that screw head, so the end of your loop, okay, right here, will have a place to go. And you can see right here, as I put this thing in here, the whole hole will be clear and it'll be ready for your screw to go through there. And again, now you don't have to worry about that cable being bit by the screw that goes into this thing. It now wraps right around that screw, and this should be really long lasting. You can see here the screw that I'm going to use compared to the one that came out of the entire unit. You can see the new one is a little bit shorter, but again the screw head was too thick. So again, I'll throw this picture up here again. I started off with sort of a long 3mm screw on a drill, and with a sanding bar I just spun the drill and sanded this flat till it came to be the same thickness as the original screw. And you can test fit that really just by putting your new screw into the slot here, just making sure it all fits in there. You can use a micrometer too to really tell the length of that, but as long as it fits in this channel, you should be good to go. Now the main assembly on this thing should be pretty simple. With your loop in there ready to go, you can just put your lower strut into your upper strut and just kind of push them together. You're going to have to hold the spring there, and then once they're together, you're going to go ahead and put the your new screw in here, very carefully, being sure you don't cross thread this thing, because it would be really easy to do that. And you shouldn't really get too much resistance. You do want to test fit this long before you do it. And it feels like it's going in there pretty good. It's going right through, again, through the loop that we put in that cable, and then this thing's going to really totally should just bottom out nicely. And you can see here, you just sort of do a test run of it inside here, just make sure it goes and has really nice clearance all the way around. It looks like it does. The other thing you can do too is look at the back end of the screw, and you can see how it almost goes all the way through there, whereas the old one really didn't fit through there. And again, now you have a really nice secure cable in there that you really shouldn't have to worry about breaking. You can see here as I pull on the cable here really tight, you see it rotates the gear. And it's just a much more secure way to have this thing on there. And again, you don't have to worry about that cable breaking. And now that you've rounded everything on the underside, that little knife blade there, you should be able to just totally move on to the final step and reinstall this thing. And last but not least, the moment of truth here. What you want to do when you've got this thing all ready to go and you're ready to make your final crimp, you just run your wire up through the aluminum plate here, as you can see, and now you're going to set the length of this thing. So what you need to do is rotate this thing around, okay, and get it in the right position that you want it. And you're going to pull up on this cable, either with a pair of pliers or your hand or something. And when you get this screw lined up in the right place, and I'll throw a picture up here of really what it looks like. You want to remember where it was before before you actually took all this stuff apart, but it's really right in the slot where you've got an area of straight channel on both sides of this thing. And then you're going to hold this thing in position, and then with a pair of pliers, you're going to very carefully come down here and you're going to crimp this crimp. Now you only got one shot at this. If you do it wrong and the length is wrong, you've got to redo the whole thing and put a new cable in. But once you crimp this in place and set it in position, you're done with this thing. You'll never have to move it because the cable really doesn't stretch at all. It pretty much stays the same length. But this is the final step in the procedure to get this cable replaced. Now once your final crimp is cut, you can go ahead and cut the end of your wire off, and pretty much this thing is pretty much on there the way it was before you took it apart. And you can go ahead and test out your retracts. I got this thing on a servo tester. Let's take a look. All right, sweet, and it goes right on in there. Let's go and extend it. All right, looks like it works perfectly. Here's another view from the rear of the strut of the sort of the cam screw that we put in there. You want to make sure that when you crimp that cable in place, again, that the gear is extended like this, and it's kind of lined up right with the straight part of this channel on this side, and where that straight part kind of ends there, right, sort of where this point is. And you'll see that that will keep the gear from rotating on you at all. Overall, guys, this is definitely the way to go with setting this gear up. It'll work well and last a long time as long as you replace the cable, put a loop around this screw with the cable and the crimp and everything, and then down here take away some of those sharp areas, and you'll have some really good working gear on this airplane. Some additional items I did to my landing gear was really just simply to add a slightly smaller wheel. Now I unscrewed my my gear unit because I want to show you guys a couple things about it. The original wheel was 75 millimeters in diameter, and it was just fine. But I found that by putting a 65 millimeter wheel on here, this is one of the many Hobby King wheels out there, that it actually solved two problems for me at the same time. The first is that the main wheel didn't fit in here all that well. You can see where I used a Dremel tool to actually sand this down to get the original wheel to fit. It was very easy to sand. There's lots of foam here to sand away, but I used a sanding drum to sand this because the wheel was scraping. And the wheel was scraping mostly because this whole intake piece was not glued in far enough forward. And you can see that by this gap right here. It had a little bit of a space here. They needed to get it a little farther forward. And what that did is it left an overhang here on the front end. And you can see here, there's sort of an underhang here on the back end, but on the front it was overhanging, and this wheel was scraping. So if you're operating on a runway, you really don't need a wheel this big anyway. So this 2.5 inch or 65 millimeter wheel fit in there just perfectly. Now, what they did at the factory too, which was a little bit odd, you could see here where the landing gear unit used to be mounted. It kind of went all the way back here because at the factory they made a strange attempt to shift this whole gear well backwards. It was actually mounted. It was kind of shoddy the way they did it, but you can see it was mounted all the way back here in an effort to get the wheel to clear here, where the problem was this piece didn't get mounted far enough forward, and the wheel was kind of too big. So instead of going with all these holes that you see down in here, they drilled all these other holes in here trying to get this thing right at the factory. You may or may not run into this problem, but anyway, this is just what I had, so I'll show you what mine looks like. I went ahead and moved it back forward into its regular position, mounted it with its normal screws, put a smaller wheel on there so it fits in the wheel well better, and most importantly, having a smaller wheel on here gives the airplane a much more positive angle of incidence while it's on the runway. So the wing actually has a positive angle and actually rotates off the runway a whole lot better with a smaller wheel. Now the wheel still looks pretty scale. It's not a tiny wheel, but it just didn't need to be as gargantuan as this thing is. And again, it solved all these problems by making the plane rotate better, and it fits in the wheel well better, and your landing gear unit can actually fit in the place it was supposed to go. Now let's take a look when I retract this. We'll see what it looks like. All right. And you can see how nicely that goes in there. There's a whole ton more space for this thing to fit in there. And it really is just the best way to go, again, because the plane just rotates a whole lot better. Now, the other thing I did to mine was I changed the screws. The original screw they provided for the wheel axle was a 3 millimeter here metric one, but it was all threaded. Okay, so as your wheel spins down the runway, the threaded screw or axle is tearing up your wheel, okay, your wheel hub. So what I did is I went to a 4mm, okay, with a non-threaded portion of the shank, as you can see here. I cut off the rest here that I didn't need, and then sanded the end of it. But the wheel moves nice and smoothly. Not only that, but the screw that they actually, or the hole they actually drilled through the end of the strut here, was a 4mm hole. So the 3mm just didn't really fit in there to start with, and the 4mm was just the way to go. It was just a perfect fit inside here. Now, the last thing I did here, which if you're operating on a runway, you can see right here between this nut and this little nylon purple washer here that I put in there, put a little piece of fuel tubing in there just to add some friction to this wheel, because this plane will go sailing down the runway, and trying to get the plane to slow down is kind of tough because there's no brakes or reverse thrust or any of that kind of stuff. So the fuel tubing will give you the friction you need to slow this thing down. Now let me go ahead and extend the gear just to show you here real quick how it looks, how it works. All right, you can see it just works beautifully. Anyway, guys, this has worked well for me. Smaller wheel, thicker axle, so your landing gear will fit in there. The wheel will fit in the hole much better. The plane will rotate better now because you have a smaller wheel, and you have a much thicker axle now. It makes the whole thing much more rugged. If you do have to carve up your wheel wells to get your wheels to fit, you can see here how I actually match the paint at Lowe's. You can do a much nicer job of cleaning these up, making them smoother. Put some CA on them or some putty or something, smooth them out and paint them. But I didn't really want to bother with it because it was a wheel well. But I was able to, again, match the color of the paint. And you can see here on the other side, I just went ahead and painted that one all white. And you can see the wheel wells are really kind of nicely cleaned up. It's a really good idea. Go over to Lowe's. What I did is I took one of the wings with me and had the paint department match all three colors. So you can see here I labeled it. I got the this is the gray, and then I got here the white. They were $3 each, and the dark gray. And it allows you to really touch up almost any part of this airplane. In fact, the decal was actually missing right here on this portion. So I just put a piece of paper right here, and you can see I just airbrushed it and cleaned it up and made it look just like the bottom of the real airplane. Also, you can see the nose gear doors. I touched those up with this touch-up paint. So you can see matching the paint over at Lowe's in their paint department for just a few bucks. You can really touch up this airplane. If you dent it or ding it anywhere, these Lowe's paints really come in handy for touching up your airplane. You can even see here on the side of the cockpit right here, if anybody saw the unboxing video, they had totally missed the decal right here. They had the cockpit kind of cocked over to one side, and they missed the decal along here, and then this line wasn't straightened up. So you can see how by matching that paint over at Lowe's, again, how I fix this, I literally just put a piece of paper right across here and then just sprayed a line there, and then just sprayed right over here with my airbrush. And you can see how easy this plane is to touch up with those touch-up paints from Lowe's. A couple things to note about the wing on this airplane, especially if you're working with the receiver-ready version of the airplane. Sometimes the wing doesn't line up perfectly from the factory. Now this one is lined up pretty darn good, but I actually had to tweak mine out of the box. You can also see how there's some movement here in the front, which I'm going to address here in one of the next clips coming up here. But essentially what I found is the front end of the wing was actually sticking up a little bit, and it didn't quite line up right here. Same problem I had in the back. It actually stuck up, and it wasn't really, the top fuselage surface wasn't really flush with the top of the wing. And the reason that happens is at the factory sometimes these plug-ins here, as you can see, these little wing pegs here that stick out of here, they use contact cement to glue these in, and contact cement actually expands sometimes if used too much. And what happens is this whole pin unit that's installed in here, it actually, when it gets installed in there, because the glue expands, it actually gets pushed out a little bit. And so there's actually a gap of space right between here. And as you can see here, what that does is when that thing pushes away, and again, this happens at the factory, obviously the wing rises up here. It also rises up back here, and then you lose sort of that alignment. So if you run into that problem, it's a very easy fix if you have the receiver ready version. And all I did is I just took a hobby knife and very carefully, again, it's just a contact cement they use, and you just cut right along here, okay? And you don't want to go too deep, but you go deep enough where you're not cutting into the foam. And then very carefully, you just sort of pull on it and just kind of wiggle it a little bit, and then just get it to come out. And then when it comes out, you can actually sand this thing and re-glue it. So the best thing I've found for all these LX models is just put some sandpaper around a hobby knife, put it right into that channel, because it's like the exact same size. And what you can do is you can sand in there and just get the glue out just a little bit. You don't want to change the shape of this thing, but you want to sand it enough so you can take this this peg, this wing alignment pin, and you can get it low enough in there, okay? So it'll actually line the entire wing up. And there's a little bit of process and error that goes along with that, a little trial and error. Just sand little by little, but it's very easy because it's just foam. Again, don't sand too much. And then what I usually do is I score these things. You can see the difference between the one here on the top that's just nice and smooth, and the other one that I sanded with some rough sandpaper, just very carefully. And then using a hobby knife, you just cut at sort of a downward angle, and a couple of slots here, and it puts these little sort of burrs on here that helps really keep the thing in there. And then what I would do is I'd put a little bit of epoxy in here and on here. I use 30-minute, but you can use contact cement to glue this in. And then you sort of install it all together with sort of both pegs on there. And you want to do this at kind of the same time. And then you go ahead and you get the wing's top surface here and here lined up, okay? So it's not too high, it's not too low, it's right here in the center. Sometimes I'll even run a pin through the underside, actually right through the foam here and into the other one, just to keep it lined up. Pins make a very small hole in there, and that'll help line this up. Anybody that wants to see a little more detail on this, if you check out the build guide I did on the YF23, it's almost the same kind of installation that I did here on this and on that one. I used some wax paper that I put around these two pins when I put this whole thing together. And you do want to tighten your screws, okay, as you're lining this up. Tighten the screws, have wax paper between two of these so the glue doesn't bond the wings together, just like I did, like I said, in that YF23 video. And with the screws tight, you line up this front part, line up this rear part, and you'll have this thing, and just let it dry, and this thing will be lined up nice and straight, just the way you see it here. Because from the factory, they should come lined up like this, but they not always all the time do. The other thing you'll notice here is, like I just talked about, is that there's a lot of movement in the leading edge of this wing. I thought there was a lot of distance between the leading edge of the wing and the first alignment pin. So what I did was I actually put a pin, a smaller pin in the wing on the other side, and I'm going to do it to this one next, and I'll show you what that looks like. You can see how on the other wing, this whole edge is nicely lined up. Again, I had to revise just a few of those wing alignment pins. But you notice on this side how the leading edge doesn't move at all, okay? The reason for that is I decided to put in my own alignment pin, just an extra one, to keep this leading edge from bending up and down so much, because there's such a long distance between here and the forward alignment pin. But you can see here simply, it's just a piece of plywood and a carbon pin. So just a little piece of carbon fiber tube. You can see also here, I buried one here into this part of the wing as well. And you can see really how nicely this whole thing plugs in. And it's relatively easy to do this, and that pin just lines up, and this thing is solid. Now all I did to do this, and I'll show you right here, just took two little pieces of plywood, and you can see how they have a slight bend in them, because you know, with your hands you can just take these things and just very carefully bend them, or put some pliers around them and just put a slight bend in them. You can use light ply or regular ply, and this is actually regular ply. You can see here that as I get this wing off here, I'll go ahead and zoom here on this thing. You can see how the arch, the curve of the wood actually matches the slight sort of curve in the wing. And really all you need to do is install it on the wing first. And by taking this little piece here that you've cut, you really literally just place it over the foam, okay, like this. And you can push down on a little to make indentations, but you just take a hobby knife and just go right around this thing. And then once you trace around it, you can just cut out what you need to. Use a sandpaper on the edge of a stick, and then you can just flush mount this thing in here, and you can see how easy it is. This is just foam, guys, so it's real easy to do this kind of thing. You mount your first one in here, and the way that I got it to line up with the other side, once you glue this in, and I actually used contact cement to glue this one here in the wing. And the next thing I did is I took the other side, put it on just like you see here, just the way I'm doing it, because this is important to get this thing to line up properly. What I did was I installed the wing and just sort of pushed it in and pushed it in kind of, and then pushed on this kind of tight. And with the pin sticking out a little bit, it would make a pin indentation, okay, right on the foam on the fuselage side, and it would kind of outline this thing a little bit. Then you could take your hobby knife and then just kind of overlap, just put your piece of wood right over top of that, trace around that part on the fuselage here. Excuse me, and then you just cut that out and you install that. And what you want to do when you do install that is you want to have a little bit of contact cement on the thing, put your piece of wood on this part here, and then you just sort of install the whole thing together, and that way you can hold this in alignment where it's supposed to be, and then just let the whole thing kind of dry like that, and it'll give you a really sweet alignment pin. You can see here the opposite side third wing pin installation, and you can see the first part of this process where you literally just make a notch in here. Again, this is foam, real easy to do this. Trace around it again with a hobby knife, and then with some sandpaper on the end of a stick. It's real easy just to clear this stuff away. Don't go too deep, just go a little bit at a time till you get the right depth, and you can see here how this thing will actually plug in really nicely, and that's just going to be really just contact cemented in place. You can use epoxy if you want to, and then by putting the second one down here, you can see how nicely this all lines up, and you want to make the hole big enough or deep enough so you can get this pin in there far enough where it's just going to stick out a little. You do want to make sure that that pin is sticking out so it's parallel, okay, to your other alignment pins. You don't want it sticking out at an angle like that or like that. If you make a mistake, it's no big deal. Again, it's just foam. You can kind of angle it the way you want, and eventually you're going to glue that sort of pin in there. You also want to watch it this way and make sure it's also lined up parallel with those pins. But once you have this thing in here just the way you see it, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to actually put this on the airplane just like I talked about. And you want to get this thing nice and lined up as best you can, and then just sort of push on this thing. And what it's going to do is it's going to make sort of a nice mark there with the pin. And as you pull this away, you'll see you have a nice little mark there where you can begin to cut the hole in there and carve the other side out. You can see here that once you trace around this with the hobby knife, you can then sort of pick away at it a little bit and get some of that foam out of there. And then again with that little sanding block, this goes very quickly. You just basically just follow those lines that you cut and get this thing deep enough, which doesn't take but just like a couple minutes to do, until you can countersink this wood in here, and then just very carefully drill a hole through the foam. You can see here the final finished product. This is all already glued in place. I'm using this, actually this new contact cement. You can use anything, but I'm using this new foam tack stuff available at foamtack.com. This is some really good contact cement. I've been using this for just about everything lately. Bought it at the hobby shop like a couple weeks ago, and I'm almost halfway through it now. So really, really good stuff. But that's what I used actually to glue this all on. You can use epoxy or really any contact cement on this thing. What I did was I glued this part on first, okay, just with the contact cement again, and glued the pin in place. And it takes some time for this stuff to totally dry. You can see it's a little rough here, both sides here. Usually you got to wait a little bit for it to totally dry and get tacky before you can just sort of wipe off the excess. This glue is still technically a little bit wet. It's still drying. I just put it all in here. But the next part I'll glue on is this right here. And then kind of as it's drying here, and before it's totally dry, obviously I'll actually want it to dry in place, and you can see how nicely this thing will fit in place. And it'll give you just a really nice wing seam, and it's nice and tough, and it's not going to move much at all. As it's drying here, you can, before it gets totally dry, you just kind of line it up where you need it. If you need to stick a pin, I usually stick a pin from the other side sometimes, going through one foam into the other, and it'll keep it there. You don't need to use it. In fact, I didn't need to use it for this at all, but you can see, again, how nicely this is lined up. It's flush with the top and bottom, and again, it's not moving around at all. Now, this is not something that you have to do. It's not necessary really at all. But I just felt that, as you could see here without the pin, this leading edge just moved around a lot. And I just felt there was such a long distance from this first pin all the way to the leading edge, maybe about 4 or 5 inches, that I just felt it just needed a little bit more of an alignment. So as this thing's zooming through the air, the wind is not catching this thing and flexing the leading edge of this wing up and down. And it does fit really nicely on there. In just a few minutes of work, you'll have a really nice finished product, real nice tough wing up front. A few other items to note regarding the wing. A real good idea, put fuel tubing on all your clevises. This goes for the entire model really. Ailerons, flaps, elevator, rudders. Just get some fuel tubing on those to keep these things in place. Also, you'll notice that the aileron servo here, I actually had to remove, and you can see right here, I had to use a hobby knife and remove the little tab that was sticking up out of these because the plate here was not flush mounting on this thing. It was actually sticking up because of those. They weren't really fitting in place. So now the thing really flush mounts on there really nicely with the 2 screws that go in there. Also, the other funny thing that was going on was it looked like they just sort of planned this backwards, and it looked like they had actually run the wire. What they had done is they had run it over the servo, and it was being pinched between the servo and this plate, and they ran the wire here, around here, up here, and then over to the middle. And I think the reason this happened is they planned on having the servo the other way. So what I did was I took a hobby knife and I actually cut through the plastic right here, and I just ran the wire straight. You can see I cut another trench. I actually cut this trench out and just re-ran the servo wire here instead of using the old notch. And you can see it's a much straighter path for the wire, not having to bend there. The only thing I had to do that was different on this because of that was one wire here was too long. The aileron servo wire went all the way over to here because it didn't go through that curve over there on the wing. So I actually cut mine off and just made a new connection here. I actually crimped my own servo connectors on here, and using a hobby knife as well here, I actually carved out a little more of this to make a little more of a rectangular block here, so all of these wires would fit in better. I used a little contact cement right here, I used a little contact cement right here, and that keeps that part of the wire in place nicely. You can see here by clearing a space right here in the channel, you can really easily make your aileron connection here and your flap connection here, and then very carefully just bury the 2 of these in here, and then you can go ahead and carefully just push your wing together, and you can see this all actually fits real nicely in place, but you got to sort of line it up this way to get it set in place, and you can see how nicely those tuck in. Now there was on this side of the airplane an excessive amount of wire. I made a notch in here which I'll show you where all those wires went, but these were significantly longer coming out of the fuselage, maybe an inch or 2 longer, and I just tucked those away down in here. And you can really put them anywhere you want, carve away any spot in here that you want to put those wires, but you can see here by tucking these connectors away right in here and making this slot a little bit bigger here, you have a little space for the wires, and it makes removing and attaching the wing much
much easier.
One item I want to show everybody on this airplane regarding the hinges on this airplane, and this really applies to any foam airplane with bullet style hinges that plug into the wings and the flaps and the ailerons, is sometimes they hinge them off center. I found that with LX models they do this more often than some of the other manufacturers, so it's something that you really want to take a look at. And what I mean by hinging these things off center is that, for example, the aileron right here, you can see how the top surface of the aileron lines up nicely with the wing. They did a really good job hinging this flight control surface. Even on the bottom, it's really nice. But the flap, however, they got kind of off center. And what I mean by that is as you look at it from here, I'll even push down on a little just to exaggerate a little bit, but you can see the top surface of the wing doesn't really line up with the flap. The flap's much lower. And then if you look on the underside, you can see how kind of grossly the lower surface of the flap just sticks out in the free stream of air. And that's because they didn't get the hinge quite centered up in here. And they may not have got it centered in the wing, right along the center line, okay, of the wing, or they may not have got it quite lined up in the center line of the flap or the control surface, or they may have got them both messed up, and it's really kind of actually hard to tell which way that they did it. What I found is the mistake that was made with this one, after kind of inspecting it, and this is a little trial and error and looking at the thing, is I found that they kind of got it off center, I think, mostly in the flap itself, like right here and right here. So now these are only, you know, these bullets are pushed into foam, not like it's a wood airplane. It'd be really hard to change this if it was a wood airplane. But you essentially need to either loosen these or remove them, and then just put some more glue in there and then just realign them. And the way that I usually do that is I will take a pin right here and I'll push right next to this hinge with this pin, and I'll push it, and I'll basically just parallel the hinge and just go all the way down in there. I'll push it down maybe about a ½ an inch or 3/4 of an inch, however long the hinge actually is, and I'll push it in a few times all the way along. And all you're doing is you're really just breaking the glue joint, okay, in here, and freeing up that hinge to be either pulled out or removed. You'll do the same thing here. You'll push all the way down in there, go about a ½ inch or so down in there, and then do the same thing on the top surface. You flip this around and you'll push on this. Once you find out where the mistake was made or where it's off center, you push down here, go all the way down about a ½ inch or so, inch, however long the hinge is again here. And now what happens is once you get that kind of loosened up, okay, you can actually realign this thing and get it set up where you need it to be, and you can get it almost exactly where you want to get it. Now there's two ways to do this. You can either grab your hand and literally once you get them loose, just pull both hinges out, but pull both bullets out and just re-glue them, put some epoxy in there or something. One thing I do is I don't totally remove them, I just kind of move them around. And in this case, as you can see, the aileron is a lot lower. So once I make some holes here, or once I make, you know, loosen that channel up here and get the glue out, often what I'll do is I'll just take a screwdriver and I'll push on the part that actually needs to be moved. So I'll actually grab a screwdriver right here and I'll push the surface from the other side, and basically just take that hinge pin and just shift it from being like, as it goes through the flap, shift it from being high to down a little bit lower. So you can kind of move that bullet hinge in there a little bit. And then to get glue in there, what I use, because I do have some access to medical stuff, is I'll actually use a syringe. So what I'll do is I'll actually take the syringe, I'll mix some 30-minute epoxy, and you got to work kind of fast, because 30-minute epoxy, when you compress it, it will begin to dry a lot faster. But all you need to do is just take this and just follow the whole same pinhole, stick it all the way down in about a ½ an inch, and then go ahead and squeeze your syringe and actually apply glue from the inside out, and it'll actually start to come out here and on the other side. So you can actually insert and apply glue with a syringe, okay, down into that thing without removing the entire thing, if you want to do it that way and you have access to this kind of thing. Now before you do any of that kind of stuff, or even add glue, if you want to remove these and then reinsert them, you always want to take a little bit of oil and just oil just the hinge, okay? I did the same thing with the elevator on this when I installed the elevator, is just get some glue on just the hinge part. Anywhere you get this oil on, your epoxy is not going to stick to it. So, and when you're doing an operation like this, putting re-gluing these and putting epoxy in there for the hinges, you can use contact cement if you want to re-glue the hinges in place. But this will keep the epoxy from sticking to your hinge, so it's a real easy way to do it. So, Anyway, a couple different ways that you can do this, but again, mostly you just want to make sure that you don't have a really gross misalignment like this is down here. And you either want to remove your hinge, realign them and glue them back in, or just, you know, put some holes in there, or, you know, break the glue joint, shift your control surface where it needs to be, and then insert some glue with a syringe or whatever, and then just let it dry in place. Don't forget to use your oil so it doesn't stick. Get your hinge frozen up, and you'll have a much nicer true flying airplane with a lot less drag. Here's a quick look at the finished product, and you can see how nice everything turned out. The top surface is nice and parallel, bottom surface is nice and parallel, everything's all lined up nicely. You can look down the surface of the wing, and you can see how that flap just lines up nicely with the top surface. And as you look at the bottom, you see there's no more that underhang, especially like right over here, it was really underhanging. And now the control surfaces, pretty much everything just pretty much lines up, and it's nice and smooth. As you look down here into the actual area that I actually cleared away here with the pins, and then use the syringe to put some epoxy in there, you can see it fills those gaps nicely. Now the finished product here is real tough. You can tug on this all you want, and it's definitely nice and strong. Same thing here, all the pockets here, you can see where the epoxy filled in that little groove. And I did actually get some epoxy on my hinge, and that happens sometimes, but because I had oiled them ahead of time, and you can even use like chapstick or something for that, but even because I oiled it ahead of time, they'll be nice and free. If I hadn't oiled it, it probably would have froze this hinge up. So anyway, guys, it's worth a little extra time. Just check your flight control surfaces, make sure everything's true, make sure the surfaces and everything line up. And if you just revise your hinges, if you have one that's a little bit off, you'll have a much cleaner, much less draggy airplane flying through the air. Now we're going to take a quick look into the motor compartment area. There's only 2 screws here, 2 screws here, 2 here, and 2 here that you remove these little plates with. And you can see it's real easy to get in here. This all came from the factory like this. You may need to cut the decal actually, because there's a water transfer decal here. So before you pull this off with a hobby knife, just make a slit right through here so you can get this thing off. Now again, guys, this isn't anything you have to do, but you know, these are items that I did with mine that I felt would really make it a lot tougher of a model. Now, starting off where we just talked about with those aileron and flap wires, I used a hobby knife and sort of cut down in here and came up with a place to put the extra wires. Now, you can shorten them if you want to, but I found it easy enough just to tuck them right down in there. Again, just a little contact cement like right on the first half here, just to help keep that wire in. Now, anybody who has this plane is going to notice I made some kind of big changes in here. I put some wood blocks and things in here that were very easy to do. One of the first things I want to start off with, again with the speed controller, just like every other LX model's twin EDF jet, for some reason they just keep forgetting to remove the heat shrink covering off the heat sink of the speed controllers. These 2 speed controllers are sitting right here. They're in the free stream of air. But if you don't get this thing off of here, it's not really going to cool all that great, and this is going to vastly improve the cooling by removing that little bit right off only the heat sink side, just with a hobby knife right off of there. You don't want to cut into the other side because there's electrical or electronic PC board components and things on there you don't really want to mess with. The other thing too is, you notice I put some wooden plates here because these fans were just sort of sitting in here. They really weren't attached to anything. Honestly, they weren't even glued in, which you could glue in, but then they're hard to get out if you really need to replace them. But what I did was, the first thing I did was unscrew, or actually they weren't screwed in. One of the first things I did was pull the fan out, and I took the fan blade off, and just like again with every other LX model's EDF jet, there really wasn't any thread lock on these 4 bolts. So the first thing you want to do, and I have a couple of these fans here, is you want to unscrew your cone, the spinner cone that's on here that's just plastic. Unscrew this, get your fan blade off, go right into here, and unscrew those one at a time and put them back in with some, or you can take them all off if you want, but put them back in with some blue Loctite, some kind of blue thread lock, so it'll keep them in place, but they're not going to be permanently in place, so don't use the red stuff. Don't over tighten them because you can crack the plastic, so just make it pretty snug. When you put your fan blade back on and tighten everything, again, as I indicated in some of my other videos, twin LX videos, I leave this spinner cone off because it's kind of flimsy and it can shatter, and I've had a few of these go and it destroys the fan. I run mine just the way you see it here. So anyway, I put them back in, and again, I just took some light plywood bulkheads, just put these right in here, and I just cut with a hobby knife. Again, guys, this is only foam, so it's real easy to put a bulkhead in here. So cut it the size you want it, put a bulkhead in there, either epoxy it down, or you know, use some contact cement to put it down in there. And then, of course, I made these inner ones as well. This was a little bit more involved, but again, 2 more pieces of light ply, just one right along here, one right here. I did have to cut down and recess into there, but you can see the residual epoxy down there that I used to put that in place. But if you use these wood blocks, it'll let you just get your EDF fans in and out easier, and they're real firm in place now. But otherwise, everything you see here came wired just as is. Again, it's just a good idea to put some wood blocks here, get your heat shrink covering off your ESC cooling fins, and of course, make sure you got Loctite on your fan nuts, and remove that little spinner cone so it doesn't disintegrate on you, and you'll have a much more reliable airplane, guys. Now let's take a look at the canopy and the battery compartment area. Mine came a little bit flukish right here because it's missing some of the decal here. I think that this whole canopy got shifted over here to one side when they applied the decal, but really it actually kind of goes right here. So I just had the paint matched over at Lowe's at the paint department, which I'll paint over that and just kind of touch that up and get rid of that. But essentially there's just a little latch here at the front that you just pull this canopy off. And it's actually a pretty decent canopy. I know some guys have complained about it, but it actually works pretty darn good. Now there's not a lot of space inside of here, and what I decided to do is use a much better connector, and I used these EC5s here. And what I did is because you have 2 3-cell batteries, they have to be sort of put in series actually. So I actually made the series connector actually part of the airplane. So you can see here. The actual wires that come out of the airplane, that's where I put the series connector, so you can literally have just your 2 batteries up, or your 2 battery wires, just solder two connectors on, and you're good to go, and it makes them real easy to charge this way too. Also, you see I have a wood bar. I just took some thin plywood, ran it across here because there really wasn't a strap on the back battery. And you can see that the front strap just kind of goes right here where the 2 of them actually meet. So you can see here where it basically just this whole bar actually slides and locks into the front half, which I'm actually going to show you here, into the front part of the fuselage. What I did is I made this sort of a sliding battery bar. So I slide it back, and I actually put sort of like a knife edge here at the front, and you can see how there's actually a slot. So I actually push that thing forward in it, and it slides in. And by strapping these 2 down, you know you have a bar that runs all the way even underneath the back deck of the canopy here. And these 2 straps will keep both batteries in place. So you can fly inverted, go crazy. You know, with the vector thrust nozzles, you can probably do some pretty interesting things with this plane. You need something to really keep these batteries in place. If you're going to fly it upright, you probably really don't need the bar, but again, it's just a piece of plywood, that's all. You can see here a couple changes I made to my battery compartment. I'm going to pull the rear battery out, and then the front battery. And you can see down here in the bottom, I'm actually going to move the camera a little bit closer here. Just like I do with a lot of my planes, I went ahead and I put in here the shelf liner with some double-sided Scotch tape to keep it all in there. For anyone that has the model, notice that there's no wires running through here. There was a wire for the nose wheel steering coming through this hole right here, and there was a wire here coming for the, I think the retract door. And they were running right through here, the battery compartment. There's very limited space. It's a real thin battery compartment. So I decided to route those through the underside of the airplane. It just made a whole lot more sense than bringing them here through the battery bay and having batteries sitting on top of those wires. So this is just a pretty nice battery compartment, but again, you got two batteries that you got to run in series together, and I put my series connector right here with EC5s because this thing will probably draw about 80, 90, 100 amps or so, and it all fits on really nicely. Now what I want to do, guys, is just kind of take a look at the underside of the airplane and show you what I did underneath in the nose gear compartment. As we look inside the nose wheel compartment, for those of you that have the airplane, you'll see what I did with the wire for the nose wheel steering. You can see I put a hole in the bottom of that battery box and just ran the wire all the way back here instead of going through the hole that was down there. So I had to remove the servo to do that. Not a big deal. Then I just routed the wire back here into the electronics bay, which all is right here anyway. So it's like a perfect place to run it. And then additionally, the landing gear door servo wire, I ran right along with it. I put a little contact cement there just to kind of tack it in place with a tie wrap right there in the corner just to keep it all, and it all really nicely went through there. Again, I just didn't see a reason why they wanted to put it, going through the battery compartment. It just didn't make sense. Also, you can see the battery straps here. I put some staples. I actually put some contact cement between the two halves of the Velcro strap, and I glued them together basically, and put a couple of, you can see 3 staples here, 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 and here. So the staples will just help keep the Velcro together. But that's the battery strap that comes down into the landing gear well, nose wheel well, and it helps to keep that wire in place there, guys. So really nice setup down here. The other thing I did to my landing gear doors is they were a little bit flexible, very thin plastic, and they bent really, really easily. And they're actually sticking up here in the nose. So what I did is I took a carbon rod, as you can see right here, and just glued it kind of all the way along the length of this thing. That also allowed me to put, you'll see right here, a little wood wedge right here, which I glued in place. And there's actually a wedge on this side too, underneath. And you can see what that did is it put a little bit of a bend in the gear door here. Now you may or may not want or have to do this. You don't really even need to do this, but what was going on is my gear doors up front right here, they were just sticking up. They weren't flush mounted with the fuselage. So by putting the carbon rods there, it solved the problem of the doors being too flexible. It made them a lot more rigid, and it allowed me to put a bend in here that will allow these the doors to be flush mounted. I'll go ahead and retract the wheels and close the doors and show you what it looks like. All right, you can see how those doors close. They now close nice and flush. And again, I guess the fuselage curved a little here, but these doors were sticking way up in the free stream, so I felt like I needed to sort of bend them a little bit. Again, this isn't something you have to do, but if you run into this problem, it'll help keep the doors rigid and make them flush mounted here on the front end of the doors. I did do a little reinforcing on the model, not very much, but mostly when it comes to the nose section. You got to remember there's 2 3-cell packs in here, so you've got about a pound to a pound and a half of batteries up in just the nose section. So all the weight is up here, and this whole nose section is glued right here on this seam at the factory. And what I noticed is when I would take this thing and flex it a little bit, it seemed like it would, or at least try to move the nose up and down a little bit, it seemed like it flexed quite a bit right at this joint where the glue was. And I figure pulling G's and all kinds of things with this, you never know if that seam could fail. Anyway, it was flexing, although it's probably tough enough to survive, normal flying. But with the vector thrust nozzles on, I'm thinking I'm probably going to be throwing this airplane around in the air a little bit. So I wanted it to be a little tougher. So what I did was just in the nose section here, I took some of this 1/64 ply birch plywood here, which is really, really just thin plywood. And you can see here where I cut it out and just put a piece right across here. It only goes about 2 inches down here into the compartment. And you can epoxy, but I just used the contact cement, guys. In fact, I've been using this stuff for this foam tack for a lot of stuff. This is just like a really powerful, really strong contact cement that comes off real easy, but it works great. I contact cemented this in place, put one here on the other side, and now this nose is really tough. I mean, it hardly moves at all. And again, you can only go about 2 inches in here. When you stick your finger in there and you look in there, you can see it only goes in about 2 inches or so. But just this real thin laminate of plywood really makes this nose section tough. And then I reinforce the underside, which I'll flip the airplane over now and show you. Now in the nose wheel well area, you can see I did pretty much the same thing, only this time I used a carbon spar and just ran it all the way through, and actually sort of right in this corner here punched a hole and pushed it all the way down into here. And again, you can only go about 2 inches or so in here before you sort of run out of foam to glue it on. But I just glued it to the side. You can see here again where the fuselage seam is right here. And by running that carbon spar, like I said, one on each side, just like I did with the upper part of the fuselage, that carbon spar actually runs all the way along here, runs about this far in here, but both top and bottom spars do a good job of bonding these together. Again, I use this foam tack stuff. Again, real strong contact cement, so it's real tough, but you can also get the stuff off if you need to. And again, just glued it right to the side. Now, it's important to note with both the top and the bottom fixed, the first thing I did, and it's a little messy, but it's very, very strong. The first thing I did was I took some sandpaper on a stick and just cleaned the paint off. You want to do that on the top part as well. So the contact cement has the foam to stick to and not just the paint, because it'll glue to the paint and then it won't be as tough of a bond. And really all I used was this carbon strip, and it's actually, you know, pretty flexible sideways, but its shear strength when you put it vertical and glue it to the wall is pretty tough. So and you can see it runs from here again all the way down to about 2 or so inches in there. You got to look in there with a flashlight and you can see how far it goes in there, but you can glue it against that wall, and then this one here on this side you can glue against this wall. And overall it makes this whole nose section here, guys, really rigid, so it's not flexing anymore, and it vastly improves the strength of the structure of the nose of this plane. Here's a quick look at the receiver access hatch, and you can see actually when you look down in here, there's actually quite a bit of space down in there, but the access compartment, as you can see, it's actually pretty small, so it's tough to get kind of in and out of there, but once everything's in place, you're good to go. Now all the electronics in this airplane are stock, with the exception of the factory BEC, which I removed just because these LX BECs, I've had some reliability issues with these, and I've never had a problem putting a Castle BEC in these planes. So, you know, if you put a Castle BEC in here, that's a good way to go. I'd use the 20 amp one. I've never had a problem with Castles. They always seem to be very, very reliable. Or you can go the other route, which is what I did, and I put a separate receiver battery in the airplane. Now, as you can see here, with the center of gravity marks right here and right here, you can see right along here, basically right along this line is where the CG is. So that's where I put my receiver battery right here. I just used a Hydromax nickel metal hydride, you know, 4A cell flat pack, 2000 milliamp. And I actually mounted it, again, right here. It's just Velcroed to the bottom surface on the inside. It's kind of hard to see. You can kind of see it sticking out right there. And as you can see down there, in order to keep it from, you know, flopping down, because you really can't see it in there, I took a little piece of wood, balsa wood, really just like a 1 inch by 1 inch by probably about, you know, 2 or 3 inches long, whatever you needed. And I stuck it in there and just sort of wedged it in there. So it actually goes all the way against, if you can see way down in there, against the sort of the top surface of the fuselage. Used a little bit of contact cement down in there to keep it in place. But again, it wedges it right here against the top inside of the fuselage just to keep it in place. Now also on the inside here, which I'm going to zoom in here, you can see I mounted a switch for that battery that, you know, goes between the battery and the receiver. I'll go ahead and I'll reach in there and switch that on. And you can see I also put a volt watch in here because you know, I am running a separate receiver battery and I want to see what it's doing every time I turn it on. Remember, you got 2 ailerons, 2 elevators, and 2 vector thrust nozzles, 6 servos operating at the same time for pitch control on this plane, so it's actually quite a bit of draw on the plane. You can see my Futaba receiver right in here, mounted sort of vertically on that front wall with some Velcro. Also down on the bottom, you can see right on that side wall there, you can see my landing gear control board, and you can see I taped the ends of it. You can see on the right down there, some of the pins are exposed on that, so by taping it and then just taping it to insulate it, and then Velcroing it on that side wall of the fuselage, or really anywhere in there, we'll keep it nice and insulated and keep it from flopping around in there. Also, you can see here where I mounted my antennas, there's one on this back wall, you can see sort of horizontally here, and you can see there's one on the side wall, so they are 90 degrees to each other. That's generally the way you want them set up for best reception. It gives you the least chance of signal loss. But anyway, that's really it for the receiver compartment, guys. Everything kind of fits in there nicely. Again, it's a small opening, but there's lots of space in there, and this thing just really clamps shut, and it's tucked out of the way. One other small improvement you can do to reinforce your push rods on your airplane is to simply just add right here a carbon tube, just by unscrewing the clevis here, cutting the length that you need, and then putting it over that. I did that really for my elevators and for my vector nozzles, mostly because they're a little bit long and they're under quite a bit of load, and by doing that you make that whole push rod much stronger. Now, I didn't bother on the flaps because the flaps are only a pull load. They don't really move much, and you know, when you pull the thing, it's when the rod is under sort of a pushing load, where sometimes they can bend, and this plane's probably going to be pretty fast. So I didn't feel that it needed it there, or the ailerons either, because the ailerons are such a short rod. But once again, if you have any question marks about the security of these push rods, just put a carbon tube over them, and that will prevent them from flexing. Alright guys, that pretty much concludes this video on the setup and build guide for the LX models T-50 PAK from Banana Hobby. As you can see from the video, lots of items in there that are tweakable to get this thing up and rolling. I'll give you a quick view here of the vectored thrust nozzles and how they operate. You can see you have full-time pitch, roll, and yaw of those nozzles. So there's quite a bit of stuff, as you can see, going on here with the flight controls on this plane. As you can see from the video, though, you know, lots of changes that we can make to the landing gear, motor compartment, wings, just a lot of little things that that take a really good airplane and really turn it into a great one. Anyway, guys, check out the flying demo videos and the unboxing videos I'll be putting out on this thing, if they're not out all already. Thanks for checking out this video. Check out the airplane at bananahobby.com. Thanks for watching RC Informer, and as always, we'll see you next time.